So I was planning on doing one of these what am I watching and what kind of stuff do I recommend videos every week or so, but then I don't know, life got kind of wacky and I didn't get to make as much videos in December as I wanted to. And then in early January, I was kind of catching up on a lot of stuff that I missed from the last, I guess, couple months because January to me is always sort of the catch up month where I'm going through a lot of the films from the prior year that I didn't get to see or I missed out on. But Ireland's really weird and annoying for that because a lot of the films release normally throughout most of the year, but then if films are coming out in the end of the year in the United States, Ireland usually doesn't get them till like January or February or something like that. Especially the Oscar films, like some of the Best Picture films that were nominated have not even released in Ireland yet, which is really annoying. Like The Brutalist, for example, is really, really, really difficult to see over here at the moment unless like you live somewhere where there's a cinema that shows that sort of stuff, which there isn't really. So this video is just kind of, I'm not going to go over everything I watched in January and in terms of television and film because there's a lot. I feel like people probably shouldn't know how much I watched this month, but it's going to kind of be a recap of some of like the major things I watched this month and the things like mostly when I'm talking about films, I'm just going to talk about the 2024 films I watched and not some of the older films I watched. And then for TV, I'm just kind of going to go over some of like the bigger stuff that I watched. And then maybe hopefully from next week, I can get back into kind of doing this weekly where I can go over absolutely everything I've been watching and not just kind of the major things. But to jump right into it, let's start with television. And I rewatched Severance season 1 because season 2 is coming out and then I started season 2. So I'm recording this the day that episode 3 of season 2 came out. I have not seen episode 3 yet, but Severance season 1 is just, it was even better on rewatch. Like noticing little things about a lot of the characters and a lot of the stuff that you didn't notice the first time. If anybody doesn't know what Severance is, it's an Apple TV show that is probably their best show, I would say. I think it's really popular. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody's watching it. It feels like a bit of an event show, which I feel like Apple hasn't really gotten before. So this is kind of their first time with that. But it stars Adam Scott as this guy who he undergoes this program called the Severance program or the Severance situation. I can't remember exactly how to describe it, but essentially what that means is that your work person and yourself are two different people. Where you go to work and your brain sort of deactivates and you turn into your work person, and your work person can't remember anything that your normal outside of work person remembers, and your normal outside of work person can't remember anything that happened inside work. So it's like when somebody's brought into the Severance program, they're essentially born new or born again, and then they wake up as like a new person down there, and then it means that they're going to be a much different person than what their work person is. And people do it because in Adam Scott's situation, I don't think this is a spoiler because it's told to you pretty quickly in the first episode, is that his wife died a little bit beforehand, so he was really emotional, he was really sad, he was crying all the time and stuff like that. And so him undergoing the Severance program and going down there means that while he's in work, he's not thinking about any of that because he doesn't know any of that. And I don't know, there's kind of something to that where I'm like, yeah, sometimes you'd like to go to work and not think about things that are going on in your life, that like you just want to work and not have to deal with a lot of that sort of stuff. So I get it, but it is a really, really, really interesting premise. And the show handles it really well. And it's the kind of show that you're asking questions about it, and the show answers those questions in terms of like what life is like for somebody like that, like things they would think, things they would do. And the show sort of answers that, where like straight away you're like, okay, this work person is doing what I probably would have done if I was in the same situation. Like it's a really, really, really cool and interesting show. And season 2, the first 2 episodes were also great. Really enjoyed both of them. I'm hoping it ramps up and starts to reach the peaks that season 1 had, because so far season 2 is a little slow. That was said in a lot of the reviews, that the first 6 episodes are kind of slow and kind of just ramp up slowly. So I'm excited to see what happens in the show when we finally start to get like the huge revelations and the huge answers, because Severance is a show that can live or die by the mystery. I feel like if things aren't answered in a way that is satisfactory, it could dampen the rest of the show. But so far, they haven't run into any of that issues yet. So far, things are happening in a really enjoyable way. Things are unfolding in a way that I can't wait to see what happens next. It's definitely the best show airing currently. Like, in terms of like, not to say it's the best show just on in general, but it's definitely the best show that is currently releasing weekly. Like, when it ends season 2, that spot might go to Daredevil if Daredevil's great. It might go to The White Lotus if that's still on. It might go to Andor if that's great. But currently, none of those shows are airing. So Severance is airing, and it definitely has the best show. So I 100% recommend Severance. One of the older shows that I decided to catch up on was Our Flag Means Death, which was an HBO Max show from, I think the first season came out in 2022, and then season 2, which was the final season, came out in 2023. And I was watching some of the final season because I hadn't watched it when it came out. I saw season 1 when it came out, not season 2. The show was unfortunately cancelled as part of like the HBO restructuring or the Warner Brothers cutting funds or whatever. I think it is a very popular show. I see continuously people on Twitter talking about it and how they want to see it brought back and stuff like that. The show stars Taika Waititi and Rhys Darby as Blackbeard and the Gentleman Pirate. I forget, it's Steve Bonnet, that's his name. I know these characters from like Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag and then from Black Sails, which two amazing things if you want to know more about pirate stuff. Black Sails, one of the greatest shows of all time, hands down. But Our Flag Means Death is like a 30-minute comedy sort of thing that takes a lot of the iconic, well-known pirates and puts them in a lot of these absurd situations. But there's a lot of deeper stuff to it as well. There's a romance between Taika Waititi's character and Rhys Darby's character, which is really cool, and the way they handle that is really emotional and really well done. I was never as into Our Flag Means Death as a lot of people were. I think it's a really enjoyable show for sure, but I've never been like in love with it the way a lot of other people are. And I kind of put off season 2 for a while because I was like, well, it's cancelled. It's probably not going to end super satisfactory because I think they wanted a season 3, so I'll hold out and see. But I watched I think I watched like 3 episodes of it last year, like late last year, and I watched the other 5 episodes of it this month. And I honestly was pretty happy with the final 3 or so episodes. I thought the final 3 or so episodes were the best of the season, and they kind of wrapped things up a lot more satisfactory than I thought they were going to. Like I expected it to sort of just end or like have a cliffhanger or something like that, but there's none of that. It ends in a way that works, and it ends in a way that you could see the show not going forward, and you could see this having been an ending if they wanted it to. I'm not sure how it worked, if they like saw the writing on the wall and decided to write season 2 as an ending. I haven't looked into any of that sort of stuff, but it worked really well, I thought. Next up, I've been rewatching Daredevil season 1 in anticipation of Daredevil Born Again. I'm going to go through all of the Netflix era stuff, which I'm really excited for because I've seen Daredevil seasons 1 through 3 a couple times, but most of the Daredevil of the Defenders Netflix stuff I've only seen the once, so I'm really excited to see like to revisit them, like things like Iron Fist season 2 and like Punisher and stuff like that, which I remember being more into than most people were, so I'm excited to see that. But Daredevil season 1, I mean, what else can you say about it other than that it's a masterpiece? There's a reason why it's the comic book show at the moment, like why it was the main comic book TV show that everyone was pointing to and being like, they'd compare it to this. Like there was a time when all the CW shows, all the ABC Marvel shows and stuff like that, people were like, it's good, but it's not Daredevil quality. Like, it's still that show where the Penguin came out late last year and everyone was straight away saying this is DC's Daredevil. Like, Daredevil is the bar that shows are still trying to reach and still trying to be. And it's not just a great, fantastic comic book show, it's just a great, fantastic television show. And Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio and just everyone in this show is unbelievable. And just the way the tone is, the way the vibe is, the way the colors are, everything about it is fantastic. I made my trailer breakdown for Born Again when that trailer came out. I remember saying it, I was like, there was a shot where the Daredevil mask was falling, and I was like, oh, that doesn't feel like a Daredevil TV shot. That feels more like a Daredevil like film sort of shot, because Daredevil TV was more like gritty and noir and stuff like that in a way. And I'm rewatching the show and I'm like, what the hell was I talking about? Because the show is so colorful and artistic, and I forgot how much just the light really, really, really worked, where we'd have Matt standing in the middle of the screen and there'd be like red on either side of him coming through, and it looks fantastic, and I can't wait to get into the later seasons and to revisit that sort of stuff. But Daredevil season 1, it's still one of my favorite seasons of TV ever, I think. I was doing like a little list where I was like putting together like where I'd rank certain things, and I was like, wow, Daredevil season 1 is still at the very top of some of my favorite things. Like, it's just that good. So I 100% recommend Daredevil season 1. One of the things that came out late last year that I didn't get to see, but I finally watched this month, was What We Do in the Shadows season 6, the final season of What We Do in the Shadows. If you don't know what What We Do in the Shadows is, it's based off of the Taika Waititi film that came out in 2014. No, it would have come out a lot earlier than that because the show started around then. I don't know. It came out in the 2000s, I think, like late 2000s. But What We Do in the Shadows was a film about it was like a mockumentary about vampires living in this house together. And that's what the show is. It's a mockumentary set in the same universe about a bunch of these different vampires living in the same house. We got like Matt Berry playing Laszlo. We got Naja. We got Nandor the Relentless. We got Guillermo. We got Colin Robinson. We got a lot of these really, really, really fun characters that like they're just funny. They just work together really well. And the way everybody talks and the way everybody interacts with each other is one of my favorite comedy show dynamics, I think. Like, I would go as far to say that these characters are so well written and so well acted, where they all stand out and are unique on their own, which is something that a comedy show needs. But I would go as far to say that this makes them one of the most iconic sitcom slash comedy show characters or like lineups. Plus the lineup pretty much never changes. Like for the entire 6 seasons is pretty much those characters, and it's great to just sort of see them that like they're always a little nasty to each other, but you can tell some of them start to care for each other. Like they start to like Yelmo a bit more as the show goes on and stuff like that. But season 6 was the final season. It wasn't cancelled, they just decided to end it. But it was a bit of a weird final season where for a lot of it didn't really feel like a final season to me. It just felt like a normal What We Do in the Shadows season. But I mean, it felt like a better than usual What We Do in the Shadows season. I actually think I enjoyed the episodes just a little bit more than I usually do this season. But they didn't feel like final season episodes. They just felt like normal episodes from the show. The quality was a little bit higher. The last episode for sure felt like a finale and was like wrapping everything up. But until then, it just felt like a normal season. And there were 11 episodes this season instead of the usual 10, with 11 being the final episode. So I'm wondering if maybe it was written as a normal season, and then it was like after they were going through it, they were like, you know what, let's wrap it up this year. Let's just have an extra episode and we'll use that as the final episode, because the first 10 don't necessarily feel like anything different than you usually expect from the show. Like there isn't that sense of finality going on, or there isn't that sense of, oh, things are coming up to an end. But despite that, it was just a really fun season. Like it's a show that I would really love to revisit in the future, because I've only seen a lot of those early seasons once, and I'd love to kind of go through it all again because they're just great characters and you love to see them. So I 100% recommend What We Do in the Shadows season 6. So now on to some movies, and like I said, I watched a lot of movies this month, but I'm gonna just do 6 that I think are like some of the ones that I've got more to say on than usual. And a lot of these films, all of these films are 2024 films that I missed out on. Some of them are Best Picture nominees, some of them were just huge Oscar films in general. One of them isn't, which I'll talk about that when it comes up. First up, I want to talk about The Wild Robot, which came out in I think around September 2024, and it's an animated film that it feels like a bit like it's DreamWorks, but it feels like a lot like WALL-E. Like I've seen people say this is the best Pixar film that's come out in years, and it's not even by Pixar. And I get that. It feels like a very Pixar film, and I'm a big Pixar fan. The Toy Story films are some of my favorite films of all time. Toy Story 2 is like in my top 5 of all time. I love The Incredibles. I love Cars. I love Finding Nemo. I love a lot of the Pixar stuff. And I definitely did get the vibe that this film felt very Pixar-y, just with the setup, with the like Roz, the robot taking care of a lot of these animals, and like there was that sort of slight allegory in the film as well to like climate change, as there's blizzards coming through the area or whatever. I mean, the basic description of it is just that Roz, this robot, ends up on an island that is completely filled with wildlife and animals, and she has to take this baby bird under her wing and like teach it to fly and like help it along. But then there's also deeper stuff around that where the bird's getting bullied, and there's a nice little helpful fox played by Pedro Pascal. And I'm explaining it terribly, but it's a great film. But I don't know, this is a me thing, and I hate that this is a me thing, but I have this habit of like when I'm hearing from everyone that something is the best thing ever, I almost go into it looking for things not to like about it, or like looking for reasons why it's not going to be the best thing ever. When everybody's telling me something is the greatest thing you'll ever see, I usually then don't expect it to be and go into it being like, well, this isn't that great. But The Wild Robot was one of those things where some of my friends saw it in cinema when it came out and were straight away telling me like, oh my God, like I cried at this, like this was amazing. My friend Darren over on the Pipeline was saying that this was amazing. Some of my friends Adriel Everest were telling me it was amazing. And I was like, I put it off for a while because I was like, I like animation, but I'm not a huge animation person. Like the Spider-Verse stuff, I love. Toy Story films, I love. But there isn't a crazy amount of animated films that I would put as some of the greatest films I've ever seen. So that alone, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to love The Wild Robot as much as everybody expects. And I don't want to go into it and then come out of it being a hater and being like, well, that wasn't that good. And I watched it. And for the first, I don't know, 15 to 20 minutes, I was like, yeah, this is just a weird mix between Wally and, I don't know, like Brother Bear and something like that. I was like, this isn't that special. But then it just starts to get really emotional and the music starts to ramp up and the characters start to become characters. And I was quickly realizing that, yes, this is one of the greatest films I've ever seen. And by the end of it, I was like, I was tearing up. I was like, this was amazing. This was so much better than anything I could have anticipated it was going to be. Like, I knew basics going into it. I knew everybody was loving the music and stuff like that. I knew everybody was loving the characters, but I did not expect it to be the amazing, one of the best films I saw last year, one of the best films I've ever seen that it was. And I was really, really, really impressed with it. I was like, it's very rare that everybody tells me something is the best thing ever, and it actually ends up living up to that. And it's such a great feeling when it does live up to that. When you're watching it and you're like, okay, I get what everybody's saying. This is that good. So yeah, if you haven't seen The Wild Robot, definitely check it out. It was nominated for Best Animated Film. It was nominated for Best Music, which I think it deserves. And I don't know what else it was nominated for, but I do think it should have been nominated for Best Picture. It's the Academy has something against animated films, unfortunately, but I recommend The Wild Robot for sure. Next up, I'm going to talk about Kraven the Hunter. And Kraven the Hunter was the first Marvel film since 2015's Fantastic Four that I did not see in cinemas. Same with DC. I've seen every DC film in cinemas since before Green Lantern came out. What was like the last DC film before Green Lantern? Would have been Jonah Hex, maybe. I think Jonah Hex was probably the only DC film like that I didn't see, and then from Green Lantern onwards, I saw everything in cinema. And then with Marvel, I didn't see Fantastic Four, but even before Fantastic Four, I was seeing a lot of stuff in cinema. Kraven the Hunter, life got a bit wacky in December, so I couldn't see it. And I kept meaning to, and then it just was getting to the point where we weren't even really showing it in my town anymore. It definitely was like, I don't know, Kraven, I know it didn't do well money-wise, it didn't do well critic-wise, but Kraven definitely fell off harder than I think most Marvel films do in my town, where like even Madam Web and like Venom and stuff like that are shown way after, like for weeks and weeks and weeks after they come out. Kraven, it felt like within 2 weeks there was already barely anywhere showing it here, which made it difficult to see. So, I mean, I wasn't expecting anything going into it. I'm not a big Sony Marvel fan. I don't even think the Venom films are that great. Madam Web it's Madam Web, and Morbius is just atrocious. So I was going into Kraven being like, yeah, there's going to be nothing redeeming about this. And maybe that was the right mindset, because I remember actually being like, okay, this isn't that bad. I mean, it's not a good film, but it's paced better than we've come to expect from Sony Marvel. It's written slightly better than we expect. The acting slightly better. The action slightly better. Like, I wouldn't ever put it anywhere near most of the MCU films or anything like that. But if I'm comparing it to Madam Web and Morbius, and even the first two Venom films, I'd probably say Kraven is a better film. Like, it feels like it's a better film. It actually feels like they went into it intending to make a film and not just making a mess. Because it's like, if you're comparing, I don't know, Kraven to Madam Web, which Madam Web was just all over the place, and Madam Web was just endless filmmaking problems. It felt like when you're watching it, you're like, why did they do this? Why did they do that? Kraven, I didn't have that many issues with, where sometimes it's a bit goofy, but a lot of the time it just felt like, yeah, it was a paced film, like it was written like a film. And I thought that they kept the story going throughout. It's 2 hours long, and I felt like they did a good job at keeping it from getting stale or boring. Characters are constantly coming in and out of the plot. A lot of stuff is constantly going on that keeps you sort of interested. And it probably has the best opening 10 minutes, I'd say, of any of the Sony Marvel films, where we start with Sergey in this prison and he has to get this hunter guy and like kill him or whatever, and then he has to escape the prison. And it was genuinely a really good opening. I thought it's probably the best part of the film, where I was like, yeah, this is a good way to introduce everybody to this character and to this world. Now, like I said, I don't think it's a good film. I just think that I went into it expecting the worst thing ever, and it wasn't the worst thing ever. So I'm not going to recommend it or anything like that, but it was solid. It was a solid time, and I think I'm wondering as well though, if maybe if I'd seen it in the cinema, I would feel differently, because at least watching it at home on my laptop, I could pause it, go make tea, I could go to the toilet, I could check my phone sometimes. Whereas in the cinema, I'm kind of like stuck there for the 2 hours. I kind of have to watch it. I can't look away for 2 seconds, sort of thing, which is probably why things like Venom and Madam Web just kind of annoyed me when I saw them in cinemas, and Morbius especially as well, where I was just kind of bored during a lot of them. With Craven, I don't think I ever necessarily felt bored. which is a compliment. So yeah. Next up, I'm going to talk about Nosferatu, which was one of the big films of last year that came out right at the end of the year. I think it came out on like Christmas Day in the United States, and in Ireland we didn't get it until January 15th, I think, so pretty late in the month. And everybody was saying Nosferatu was going to be one of the best films of the year. I was talking to some people who got to see it at film festivals, and they were even saying like, yeah, this was their favorite film of last year. But this wasn't like, The Wild Robot, where everybody telling me it was going to be amazing made me not want to see it, because it's Robert Eggers who directed Nosferatu, and I think Robert Eggers, he manages tones and vibes and aura in films in a way that nobody else does. He has a real knack for taking this gritty time period and making you feel like you're in it. Like The Witch is great. I don't love The Lighthouse. The Lighthouse is a little bit too weird for me, but The Witch and The Northman are both fantastic films in my opinion. And because of those two, it felt like Nosferatu was going to be more like them and less like The Lighthouse. So I was really excited for Nosferatu. And then I watched it, and yeah, it was one of the best films I saw last year. Like, it was unbelievable. The music, the soundtrack was great. Everyone was fantastic. Lily Rose Depp was so good. Nicholas Hoult was so good. Aaron Taylor Johnson was so good. And Bill Skarsgård as Nosferatu, or as Count Orlok, was fantastic. And this is a film that I've always like known a bit about. One of the first films we watched in college in first year was the 1922 Nosferatu film, the German one, which I've always like I've always thought that that's just a scary, freaky film, just because of like it's the black and white, it's the constant jumpy frames, it's the way that the film goes in and out due to the era it's made in. It feels scary, it feels spooky, and I think this film did a fantastic job of replicating that. Like, yeah, it's filmed like today. We don't have black and white, we don't have jumping around stuff, but he managed to make it still feel like that early 1900s sort of film where it's like it's just creepy, it's just eerie, it just makes you feel uncomfortable. And I really really did vibe with that. That's always my favorite kind of horror. Is not jump scares, is not, like The Conjuring or like Annabelle or something like that. It's stuff like Nosferatu, where there's a real attempt to just make you uncomfortable and just make the the setting and the era that you're supposed to be watching just feel like you're in it. Like, you feel like you're trapped, like Nicholas Holt's character at times, and it's fantastic. And I can't wait to rewatch it, because I feel like it's going to be one of those films I want to revisit every so often just because of it. And I can't wait to see what Eggers does next. I heard he's doing, like, there's a bunch of projects he wants to work on next. Nosferatu was apparently his white whale, where he was really wanting to make this ever since he started making films, and he wanted to make it straight after The Witch and stuff like that, but he wanted to get better at filmmaking, and he waited until now to do it. But I mean, I think it's fantastic. If this is his white whale, I hope whatever he comes up with next can match this, because this might end up being like his magnum opus, his thing that just is his film, like his definitive film. Next up, I'm going to talk about a film, and this is a bit of a controversial one, so I'm not going to spend too long on it because I don't know where people stand on it. But Emilia Perez is a Best Picture Oscar nominated film that is riddled with controversy. And it's a long film. I thought it was way too long, honestly. I didn't like it. I'll just say off the bat, I was like straight away like, this this isn't fun to watch, sort of thing. Like, it's not a visually fun film to look at. It's very gray, very washed out. It doesn't feel like it deserved getting nominated for like best director or best cinematography or whatever it got. Definitely didn't deserve best picture. Even the music was weird. It felt very off. It didn't feel like I saw Wicked. I didn't love Wicked, but the songs in Wicked, it felt like music. The songs in Emilia Perez do not feel like music. It doesn't feel like a musical. It feels like people are talking and they're raising their voices to like match the background music in a way. I don't know if that's making any sense, but it feels like people are just talking through the songs, and there's music playing while they're talking rather than actually singing, or rather than it being an actual musical. And that just felt very weird to me. It felt very off-putting in a lot of ways. But there's a lot of controversy about the film. The director is a French white man, and he did zero research on Mexico and Mexican culture, and on trans culture and all that sort of stuff. And the film tackles all of that heavily. So apparently he messed up on pretty much every front there. I have seen there's a lot of boycotts for the film from Mexicans who are saying, for people who live in Mexico, are like, Dear Academy, Mexico hates this film. It's racist. It's offensive. It's stereotyping. It's a lot of this other stuff. And I mean, I'm not Mexican, obviously. I'm not trans, so I can't really speak to any of that sort of stuff and like with my experience. But just based off of the film itself, I didn't enjoy it. Like just based off of none of the controversial stuff, I just did not think it was a well-made film. I just did not think it was an enjoyable film. I was extremely bored throughout. I thought that sometimes it brought me back in by just doing the stupidest things and just the outlandish things. Like a lot of you have probably seen that scene of Zoe Saldana's character going through the like the medical center or whatever with the song playing. And that was, I didn't watch that scene. I saw images of the scene, but I never watched it. So I was not prepared for what they actually say in that scene and what it actually is. And it shocked me. I was like, wow, okay. But yeah, I don't know. I did not enjoy the film at all. I do not think it's Best Picture worthy at all. I think The Wild Robot should get in there more. Nosferatu should get in there more. And some other films I'm going to talk about should get in there more. Next up, I want to talk about is a film that I was really excited for all last year, which is A Real Pain, starring Jesse Eisenberg and Kieran Culkin. And it was a film that caught my attention pretty early last year, where people were talking about the premise of the film is that Jesse and Kieran are both cousins, and they reunite after years to go visit their grandmother's where she lived in Poland and go through this Holocaust memorial tour. And just that sort of caught my interest as a really interesting idea for a film, especially since Jesse and Kieran are both really fantastic character actors. And I'm familiar with Kieran from Succession, and then Jesse obviously from things like The Social Network. And I think they're both great. And I was really excited to see how the two characters would deal with each other and the dynamic that they would have with each other. And I wasn't expecting the film to be as emotional and be as real and serious as it was. Kieran's character, he's goes through a lot of stuff in the film, and they never say it out loud, but they kind of give the implication that he has bipolar disorder and that he's dealing with a lot of that sort of stuff, and that at one point in the past he was extremely suicidal, and how that affected Jesse's character and how he had to deal with a lot of that sort of stuff. And I wasn't expecting the film to get that deep, because we see Kieran Culkin in Succession where he plays Roman, who is this very, very, very over the top, loud character that is always trying to be a dickhead to people and always trying to be annoying to people. And there's more to him, but in general, it feels like a very, I don't know, he feels different here. It feels like sometimes the idea is that they're trying to trick you into thinking this is just him playing Roman Roy again, but he's not. There's so much more underneath the character to that. And the more they get into the emotion about it and the more they dig into that, the more serious and deep the film gets in a way that just floored me. Like, I don't want to get too like personal or anything like that, but like some of the stuff that Kieran was dealing with, I was like, that's really, really, really relatable to me. Like it almost felt uncomfortable watching it at times, because I was like, this might be hitting too close to home for me. And I thought that how they handled that was fantastic. I think maybe this is why the film might mean more to me than it meant to a lot of people, was just because it felt more personal to me, and it really, really, really felt real. And the Holocaust stuff as well was really well handled, and going through that tour of this town in Poland and going through a concentration camp and that sort of stuff really, really, really made the film just stand out as an impressive film that I think handled all of the topics and the subject matter it was handling extremely well, because dealing with things like bipolar disorder, suicidal people, and the Holocaust stuff, those are all three extremely touchy subjects that it would be extremely easy for the film to get one of them wrong and then sort of devalue itself because it's not handling these topics well. I mean, I personally don't think they handled any of the topics wrong at all. I think all of the topics were handled extremely well, and it just added in this extra part to this film. I also think this film should have been nominated for Best Picture. It was one of my favorite films of last year, and I think it's one of my favorite films of all time already. But yeah, I recommend A Real Pain. Anyway, those are some of the films and television shows I watched this month. Not all of them, just some of the major ones I wanted to talk about, and I really enjoyed all of them. Well, some of them I enjoyed. Emilia, Perez, and Kraven, I guess I didn't have too much enjoyment with. But yeah, it was a fun month. I'm excited to get into February and start to kind of see some stuff in the cinema, because this is the first month, maybe over a year, where I didn't see anything in cinema, which is kind of crazy to me. But I'm excited to get into February, where we have like MCU films coming back. We have some other big films coming back. We've got some big TV shows returning. So I can't wait to kind of talk about that stuff. I might try and keep up doing one of these once a week, just so that they don't all build up and I have to do them at the end of the month. But yeah, what have you been watching this month? Anything great? Have you watched any of this stuff this month? What do you think of my opinions on everything? Am I wrong? Am I right? Let me know. And if you're not subscribed yet, please do so. If you are, make sure to like and share. Thanks so much for watching. Have an amazing day.